Hello and welcome to this audio commentary for John Carpenter's In the Mouth of Madness from 1994. The version you're looking at should be 1 hour and 35 minutes long, so just make sure that is the version you've got. This is an audio commentary for the entire film. I'm Proper Horrorshow, and I'm joined for this commentary by Harry Robinson of the Lotus Eaters.
Hello there.
Hi, Harry. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what you're going to bring up for this one. I've got some notes on this. I know I wanted to cover that this is full of delicious Stephen King jabs. It's got some Lovecraft appreciation, and it's also, I think, got some pretty interesting philosophy, some relevant stuff for our time.
Yeah, I've not really thought about the film that hard, to be perfectly honest. I have watched it once in the past, and I was a really, really big fan of it when I did watch it.
I wish you hadn't said that. It's going to be awkward when you've got the much higher quality input here.
I'm sure it won't be anything like that. I'm sure that you're going to be absolutely schooling me. I'm sure that I'm going to be blundering along as I often do. Now, I really like John Carpenter films. I'm a big fan of films like The Thing, obviously, is a classic. Halloween. One of my favorites by him is Big Trouble Little China, which is very stylistically different. Certainly tonally very, very different, because John Carpenter seems to be one of those directors who's a chameleon. He can make in terms of genre, he can make any film that he wants, but it will always feel like John Carpenter either way. But I only watched this for the first time last year at the recommendation of Stelios, my colleague, because he's a really, really big fan of this. I believe he's appeared on your show before as well. And
yes, Stelios requested this. He wanted to come on one of my streams and discuss this, and I had to say, unfortunately, we've already done this. And then I remember you also requested to do this, and so I thought, well, we've talked about it on stream, but why not try an audio commentary? Because I don't know if you listen to many of them, but I tend to find audio commentaries are, I think they're just terrible most of the time.
Yeah, that's why I don't listen to them. I've listened to clips from them, and I never really seem to get much out of them. Obviously, sometimes you'll get these really interesting little tidbits and snippets from the director or the writer or the actors about how they did something, what the intention behind something was. But you know, it seems like you're basically just finding a worse way to watch the film and an interview at the same time. You could get the same experience by just having two screens with an interview and the film playing on each one.
Even that makes it sound more high quality. By the way, there goes our first Star Trek actor there. I feel I have to note it. I've watched too much Red Letter Media. If you can find the director's commentary for this online, and it's a weird one because whilst I wouldn't say it's high quality, it at least avoids most of the tropes of just saying, so-and-so was great to work with. Oh boy, it was cold that day, which is most of them. The one that's freely available on YouTube is John Carpenter and the cinematographer Gary Kibbe. And it's quite unique because Carpenter has his usual sort of director's input, but Kibbe is an expert in lighting. And so almost all his contribution is from Carpenter asking him to specify how they did the lighting shots. And that's amazing, that's great, but that is a level of technical detail that is beyond me, and it made it a really odd commentary.
Yeah, I bet I mean, that sounds like if you're a lighting whiz, if you're a guy who really watches a film and goes, "Oh, look at that light in there." And this is a very nicely lit film, to be fair. Especially here, you can see the really nice even lighting, making everything seem bright, which really, really contrasts with the shadows that you can see here. And then later on in the film, in particular, when you get to the village that he goes to, the little fictional town, yeah, there's a lot of really great use of shadows. But also, the most I know about lights is, flicking the light switch on and off. So I can't imagine I get much out of it.
I took one or two notes, but yeah, a lot of it is, how can you say, it's one of those things where when it's done well, you don't even think about it. So I appreciated knowing how much effort went in. I got a few takeaways from it, but it wasn't exactly what I wanted to hear about. So I wanted to hear stuff like, by the way, like this moment here where they're being tortured by Dr. Saperstein with something being played nice and loud. I think this is taken straight from Silence of the Lambs. A little reference there to Dr. Chilton. And I think overall in making this, John Carpenter has harvested some great stuff from things going around at the time, like Silence of the Lambs, massively from Prince of Darkness, by the way. And he's very frank about this in the commentary, just saying, yeah, I did that in Prince of Darkness and it worked well, so I did it again here. I really
Yeah,
kind of admired how frank he was. He's not pretentious at all.
Yeah, Carpenter strikes me as one of the more down to earth directors. The hand,
The hand.
the first sign of mischief going on. That's a really nicely framed shot as well.
Oh, and I think is it now we get a little bit of that excellent lighting that you talked about with the shadows. I think this is. I could be wrong. There we go. Such a nice unnerving effect, just for our benefit. It's so good. I'll just say some of the details of this. So this was directed by Carpenter, but not written by him. It was making great use of montage throughout.
A lot of foreshadowing. This is a really excellent intro to the whole film. And just to finish off some of my thoughts from earlier,
sure.
one, that intro song at the beginning of the film sounds almost exactly like a very blatant rip-off of Enter Sandman by Metallica, which was a huge hit in the early 90s. I think it's still probably one of the most famous, most listened to metal songs ever released. That was one of the things that Metallica are already a big band that sent them through the stratosphere. You know, in 1991, I think it was it was somewhere early in the 1990s. They played to Russian crowds after the fall of the wall, after the fall of the Soviet Union, and I think they were playing to something ridiculous like over 1 million people. And they had them in the palm of their hands because they were such an effective, powerful, famous band. They were at the top of the world at the time. And the reason that it sounds like a complete rip-off of the song is because it is because John Carpenter wanted Enter Sandman for the beginning of this film because it ties into some of the ideas of dreams and make-believe stories that we tell ourselves and the effects that they have on reality. And I think Metallica turned him down or said or asked for too much money because they were so big at the time that they just couldn't afford it. So he went, fine, I'll do my own then.
I can understand it, to be honest. And the money version probably is the one they got absolutely what's the phrase, nerfed on the budget. They were set to do this for $15 million and then had to bring it down to 10. So imagine when you're doing that, one of the first things that goes is an expensive soundtrack, especially when you're John Carpenter and you love to do your own music as well.
Yeah, you pointed out Star Trek actors. I'll point out, I think this is David Warner here, appears in late series 2 of Twin Peaks. So
yes.
We're the two sides of Red Letter Media here. You're the Mike Star Trek, and I'm Jay Twin Peaks guy.
You've done the Jay hair journey as well. No, yeah, I feel my inner Mike.
He cut his hair again.
He has. Well, David Warner, you're absolutely right. But he was in Star Trek. He was in one of the films. I want to say, oh God, I'm not even gonna bet it because you'll just get people angry on the internet. Which Star Trek was it? I think it was Empire Strikes Back. Yeah, I think that's the one it was, guys. Don't correct me.
I'll really annoy people on the internet when I say this. I don't care about Star Trek. Left wingers are right when it was always propaganda. That's my little hot take that I'm going to throw out there.
100%. David Warner we know and love from Dune. June. No, darn it. It's Lynch. Got me thinking Lynch. No, The Omen is what I mean. And Straw Dogs, of course. And I mean, he's just he's all over the scene. Scream 2, he had a nice cameo in. So he is a horror legend. It is absolutely lovely to see him turning up and bringing quite a bit of class to the proceedings.
Yeah, I've got to say, you say the film's budget was nerfed. It doesn't feel like it, and it doesn't look like it through the film. Maybe that's just because of the high quality of the individuals involved, but whatever issues they had with the budget, they really hid very nicely. Nice transition there.
Oh, yeah, that was great, wasn't it? I think we can point out some of the ways they very intelligently saved money. And John Carpenter knew how to save money here. And a lot of that is sort of reusing sets, reusing footage, and the foreshadowing with montages also means that they land so much more powerfully because things are set up through that. We'll also see some of the John Carpenter trademark sort of highly efficient writing that we've talked about before, when he just sort of skips over segments that could be a drag with what is almost a complete cheat, but it's pulled off so well I can't be mad. By the way, the people in the room, one of them is a regular, that is Peter Jason, who had just been in They Live, Prince of Darkness with John Carpenter, very regular. Nice to see him working with him again. And the black chap there is Bernie Casey. This is his first time working with Carpenter. I couldn't place him, so I looked him up. He's a bit of a blaxploitation star. And he,
right.
yeah, good on him. He was in a black version of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde. Would you like to guess the title?
Or
Or do you want to not risk it?
You tell, elucidate, enlighten me.
It's very disappointing. It's just
enrich me.
It's Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde.
Dr. Black, Mr. Hyde, not Dr. Black, Mr. Tyrone, nothing like that.
No, they're very, some of the blaxploitation, look, they can't all be Blackula.
I thought he was going to take it like the Chris Rock route, where it would be like
Oh,
Dr. Black, Mr.
No, not so much, not so much.
Is this Sam Neill's first time working with John Carpenter? Because I can't recall him being in any of his previous features.
Yeah, I believe it is. He had a bit of horror pedigree. I mean, I believe we're coming off Jurassic Park with him, sort of the year after that, but he was probably filming this before the Jurassic Park phenomenon had really kicked off. I know Sam Neill most, don't judge me too hard, from Omen 3, The Final Conflict, as I was a little obsessed with that when I was about 11.
I've never
that
watched
whole trilogy.
I think I've watched the first Omen, and it was I think the best word that I could use to describe it, and please take no offense of this, is hokey. So I've not seen the third one. I know him primarily from Jurassic Park, but in terms of the horror films that he's been in, because I don't know if you'd classify Jurassic Park as horror, it was an earlier film which you've covered on your channel before, which was Possession.
Yes. Yeah, I'm unable to remember the director's name, but he's a Polish director, and that thing was incredible. I learned that Sam Neill actually started off directing.
Did he really?
Blew my mind. Absolutely blew my mind knowing that. I want to throw a question out at you. We had an establishing shot for this wonderful chap with the axe and some absolutely incredible contact lens effects. And I wondered, would you have liked this scene better if we didn't get the establishing shot of him where he was across the street? Would you have preferred him to just slowly come up without any kind of announcing shot?
Yes, honestly, that was probably the only... Even though it's still a great scene, and it still builds tension nicely, it was a missed opportunity to not have that be an entire one-take scene, where he comes through the door, and you may or may not notice at the time, and then he slowly approaches, because he would have been directly in the center of the frame. Lovely contact lenses there. He'd have been directly in the center of the frame, slowly approaching, and you as the audience have to be paying attention to notice him before he's too close. And when you do, that just builds so much tension. And then he would be able... I feel the cuts away from the shot from when they're talking to see him crossing the road, they dismiss... They take away a little bit of that tension that was building otherwise. Still a great scene. But it could have been done nicer, because I really like, once again, Twin Peaks, there's quite a few scenes in Series 3 of Twin Peaks where Lynch does that, where there'll be a character slowly approaching at the camera, and you have to be the one to take notice, especially when there's one scene in particular where there's a character out of focus who looks like a large black figure in the background, slowly approaching the camera, and the characters in the focus haven't noticed yet. It's really effectively done. But still great, though.
Yeah. Interesting. I haven't seen season 3, but it's that kind of ominous... I prefer it. And you know what? I think it would work better on the rewatch as well, because then you'd be sort of thinking, "Oh gosh, that was set up so long ago."
Yeah,
It would be my preference too.
it feels like kind of, I don't know if you'd call it old fashioned, but kind of the time filmmaking,
Hmm.
to have the cuts and show what's going on without trusting the audience as much to be paying attention. But
Yeah.
I feel like it holds up better if you do it in a more deliberate way. But it's still great. I will say, can I say something that might be a little bit controversial
Oh,
here?
rock on.
So, of all of the John Carpenter films that I've watched, particularly the horror films, this one I think is my favorite, and I think might be, I don't know if I'd call it objectively the best, but it's certainly up there. I think it's better than Halloween, and I prefer it to The Thing, because I know that
Hmm.
everybody says that The Thing is his horror masterpiece, the best film he ever made, and throw lots of really great compliments towards that film. And I think it's a great film, but I
Hmm.
will say I appreciate it more on a technical level than I do feel the fear that the film is supposed to be generating. Whereas with this, even though you could say, oh, on a technical level, it's not as impressive as the thing. I
Hmm.
think that it built a much more tangible tension, especially when you get to the middle part of the film where they begin traveling down the road and into the village.
Hmm.
I
No,
felt it
I'm
far
with
more than
you.
I've
I,
ever
I,
felt The Thing, and I don't know if that's
hmm.
controversial or not, because The Thing is such a popular film, but that's how I feel.
Well, it's absolutely controversial, but I'm not going to be too mad at you there. I find myself thinking that, well, the thing is absolutely wonderful. It's almost it's not as demanding. It's a straighter story told incredibly well. But this and, say, Prince of Darkness, I think are much more challenging. They're more ambitious. They're messing with things a lot more, and therefore, okay, they are messy. But I think through that they come to more interesting ideas. But between that, I still think we're splitting hairs probably between some extremely high class horror amongst the entire Apocalypse trilogy. And going back to Prince of Darkness, I hadn't originally liked it, but on the rewatch, it really grew on me. And this one, well, we're just talking about how it has some fairly unsubtle editing with the axe wielding maniac who's revealed to be Sutter Kane's publisher. On the rewatch of this, and it's about the fourth rewatch, I started just picking up a few more subtle hints, which seems weird to notice when there's so much that is just in your face, flashy montages that are absolutely not subtle. But there's some nice stuff worked in here, so no argument from me. We should get a few notes in there. So Charlton Heston was the I suppose the manager, the director for this publishing company for Sutter Kane. That always struck me as kind of odd casting because he's just such a big guy and it's a fairly small role. I always wondered what he was doing there for that.
I don't
It's a
know. It might have just been that he read the script and enjoyed it, wanted to be part of it. Because sometimes you get actors do that. Not everything is always about the high-profile money roles.
hmm, yeah, possibly just wanted something a bit more interesting, and this is definitely an interesting film. Um,
Yeah,
they're
and you
also
saw earlier that they were talking about Stephen King,
oh
and
yeah.
this is Sutter Kane, the main the antagonist, outselling Stephen King. When this film clearly very heavily influenced by Stephen King, who of course Carpenter had adapted Christine before.
Mm,
So
y-
takes a lot of influence from him as well as H.P. Lovecraft. It's kind of a meld of the two of those creative uh, those creatives and their styles with the cosmic horror, and then the focus on. I think mainly what it takes from Stephen King for me is the fact that it's focused on a writer, because Stephen King
mm.
always writes about writers, because fundamentally he's only got a certain level of creativity.
To an extent, yeah. I feel like there is a very good-natured but maybe quite cutting level of analysis that Carpenter has put in here, because Kane is absolutely a Stephen King parody, maybe somewhat light-hearted. Actually, maybe let's get to that in a second. I just want to say I find it kind of interesting that Carpenter's thrown in the police as a threat, the police just beating someone down. I'm thinking that's maybe, given that this was in 1994, do we have a little late Rodney King aspect, a little late Rodney King commentary here?
I, I mean, I'm certain that Carpenter would have had sympathy with King at that point, and it may be playing into that. But was the guy who was beating up Black, or was he just a nondescript homeless white guy? Because I
We
feel
didn't
like,
really see
yeah,
nondescript, I'd
it
say.
might just be a case of um, Carpenter building that the world that Sam Neill is in is starting to decay, because obviously
Mm,
part of the point of it is that Sutter Kane's books have subtle messaging in them that opens the realms to evil and lets all of these evil forces in, begins to
mm,
possess people. So it's just an early hint at what's going on there, alongside the fact that Sutter Kane's own what was he?
mm.
Was he the PR? Was he the agent? He was the agent,
Yeah,
wasn't he?
I think he
He's
was
the
the
one who
agent.
burst through the window.
Oh, interesting. Fair point. I'm just waiting if we see her again because I just love this early role for Rachel Maddow. Very nice. It's kind of like
The
when
first one
John.
not.
Yeah, it's like when John Stewart turns up in the faculty. You know, I just thought I'd. Sorry, I couldn't resist it. I couldn't resist it. Yeah, going back to like Stephen King. How can I say? It's. I feel it's good natured critique, but what I feel this movie is going to do is look at the Stephen King tropes, replicate them flawlessly, and then kind of show that there's something much more interesting underneath, which is basically Lovecraft and some other influences. And in other influences, I would say stuff like British writer Nigel Neal. So the book that they've shown you a lot of is the Hobbs End Horror, and Hobbs End is a tribute to Quatermass and the Pit. It's the, I believe, fictional tube station that loads of stuff kicks off in. And Quatermass and the Pit is also about a sort of, how can we say, sort of slightly extraterrestrial but devilish force that sends out a signal that turns people crazy. Um, so with that tribute, I think Carpenter's being quite sort of forward in saying, "Hi, this is one of my inspirations here." And of course, he'd done Prince of Darkness just a few years earlier, and he had written that under the pseudonym Martin Quatermass. So he's borrowing, he's very direct in how he's borrowing. Oh, there we go. It is a nondescript homeless person being beaten up. That
And then
answers
we
that
could see that
question.
face. Excellent use of physical effects, Carpenter. I say,
Mm.
was would you call Carpenter a master of physical horror effects?
I think he knows really well how to use them. In this film, it's KNB did most of those physical effects. That's, I want to say, Kurtz Nickelenberger. Apologies, I have got that wrong. But some of the people who would go on to do Masters of Horror, a very well, let's say not my favorite series. By the way, some of the people in the back have full-on monster masks on. You don't necessarily pick that up, but your brain does, to once again steal from Red Letter Media. Just in amongst sort of normal-ish looking people, there will be fully deformed mutants in the back that your brain can just catch a glimpse of.
Yeah, even then, the
Mm.
police officer is pretty well deformed.
Oh, it's
And once again, what this is doing
mm,
is playing into a theme that Carpenter touches on in They Live. Obviously, They Live, it's from the perspective of a heroic action hero
mm,
breaking people free. But in this, it's playing on that idea of being the man against the crowds, the one sane man in a world going crazy, the only
mm,
person when the mobs are devouring one another, who's trying to talk sense into them, but being helpless to do so. So it's kind of like an inversion in that
mm.
way.
That's an
And
interesting way to look at it.
it's also interesting because of the themes of this film,
Mm,
being that the idea that fiction is almost like tapping into an extra plane of reality, the a fourth dimension almost.
mm,
And people like Lynch approach creativity in this way because he's into his transcendental meditation. He believes that
Mm.
there's kind of a unified field where all of imagination comes from, that we're just tapping into in our plane of reality. But there
Mm.
is this theme that you see in this film of the idea that you're tapping into a different plane of reality, but it's a malevolent plane. And when
Mm.
you bring that energy into the world, that you're going to be making the world worse through its malign influence. And I think that's
Yeah.
interesting because these days we're often told, of course, that if you notice any themes in fiction that you're not happy with, that you're just crazy. You're just noticing things that aren't there, bro. Why do you care, bro? Whereas this film is just very overt, whether or not it's in a fictionalized realm, but it's very overt with the fact that, yeah, this stuff has consequences. It can
I'm
affect the
so
real
glad
world.
you said that. Yeah.
Obviously, it affects the real world. I always think, why would we tell stories that have messages in them, morals in them, if they didn't affect the real world anyway?
Mm. No, absolutely. I'm so glad you said that. This film is pretty unappreciated. Like the Rotten Tomato score is an absolute disgrace. 59% from critics, and
Really?
yeah. Oh, my version of the page is janked, but I think it wasn't much greater among the audience either. Oh,
This is why you
73
can't
actually.
trust the masses.
Apologies. Yeah,
Oh,
but
okay, all right, okay. The
this
masses had it more right on than the critics, which isn't that.
exactly.
It's not that surprising, but they still weren't perfect with it. 'Cause this,
Standard,
I,
standard. Oh, by the way,
I
can I just note here, the state that they've identified Sutter Kane's location being is between Massachusetts and Maine. Maine is a Stephen King state.
yep.
Massachusetts is mostly Lovecraft. Great little touch. But yeah, I was just going to say this was so underappreciated. It was really hard to find on DVD, hard to find on Blu-ray. Now, Shock Factory have done a great version of it. Sorry, Shout Factory. But you also told me the whole darn thing is up on YouTube.
That may or may not be
Mm,
how a friend watched it for the
mm.
first time. But I don't know if that channel is still up because the channel that it was being hosted on literally had Return of the Living Dead on there. I think it had the first Hellraiser. It had a lot of full horror films from the 80s and 90s on it. And I don't know how it was still up. So it may or may not still be there. But last time a friend checked, it was.
Amazing, amazing. Gosh. Sorry. Anyway, you are on some really great territory about what's going on, what is happening here, as well as this idea of fiction being a sort of realm of dreams that can influence us. One that is really Lovecraftian, the idea that we are all in great. I shouldn't have tried to pronounce Lovecraftian names on a commentary. This was a terrible idea. Great Azathoth's dream. But on the other level, this is kind of in the 90s where you've got moral relativism, you've got postmodernism, the idea that which grand meta narratives you take influence your society, therefore you can reject them, etc., etc. Both these
Yeah.
ideas are very true, and I'm very sympathetic to what you were saying there. Yeah, the stories you're telling, the grand narratives you build about yourself and your culture, they have a major impact on your world. Of course they do.
Yeah, of course. You can look into anything that's been going on in the past 10 years or so since the dreaded Gamergate first happened to know just how much more blatant that the propaganda in television, film, music has been getting.
Mm,
Where it's almost shocking these days to see a film that outright addresses the impact that fiction can have. But of course, we're talking about the early 90s. This is a post satanic panic environment. And that's when I think it was one of the last times really that there was any power in the mainstream for people to complain about the fact that there were negative messages being spread in media.
mm.
Now, I personally think that the crusade against heavy metal was a bit misguided because I think heavy metal actually has a very positive effect on people, or at least some of the heavy metal of the 1980s did. I don't think it was um, as bad as some would have said. Uh, But still, there was a lot of merit in the idea that the messages being spread in the media were terrible for people, and now you get that turned around, and the historiography of it is, oh, these were just a bunch of crazy Christians who had no
Mm.
idea what they were talking about. They were jumping at shadows when really they were right.
Yeah, yeah, it's a crazy idea. There's no way any of this influences how you think in the world. But all the same, we do need to make sure we carefully control the messaging of absolutely everything. Um, we're also
Yeah,
it's
critical
interesting.
drinker with the message.
Uh,
Yeah, do you
I
know?
should I should not comment on the critical drinker in the message. I should behave
Yeah.
myself.
But, do you have any ideas why the messages got so blatant? Because there's one that I like
Mm,
from there's one idea because you know people have all sorts of like, oh well, things have progressed so much that they can be more blatant with it. Maybe the elites behind it are getting more confident in themselves, yada yada yada. My
mm.
favorite interpretation is black pills. Oh, is that a young Anakin Skywalker?
Oh no, you got to wait for him later. I'm
Was that
afraid.
not young Anakin? Oh yeah, he shows up towards the end, doesn't he? But my favorite is Black Pills, who suggests that because of the changing demographics of America, changing the audiences aren't smart enough anymore to pick up on subtle messaging. So they just have to literally look in the camera in these days and just say, by the way, you should hate white people. Whereas before, it was a bit more implicit than that.
Yeah, I could go for that. I mean, I think there's a certain amount of frog boiling, the fact that your general audience would have just gone right out of there if it was so in your face. Um, so after a long amount of frog boiling, you can just like put it out there. But I also heard the version of it's kind of like the quality of writers has dropped. It's bio-Leninism in the writers. They
Oh
don't
yeah, that
have the
wouldn't surprise
subtlety
me as well.
anymore.
And to be fair, now that we've all had a nice healthy dose of Twitter for 15 or so years, and we've got a look at the inside of these people's minds. Yeah, these people are not as smart as you once thought they were when magazines could curate interviews with them. All of their media persona was heavily kept aside, and you only saw the good bits. No, these people are idiots.
Mm. And if I may also venture, cowards who will be bullied into any position. Um, just to pick a random example, folks, I swear we will talk about the film more directly soon, but this is gold. We are now radicalizing you. Enjoy your radicalization. That shot, by the way, of the windmill, I absolutely loved. I thought that was kind of a subtle, sick joke that Carpenter put in. We've seen this poor kid go round cycling. He's got the cards in the spokes, and he can never escape. He's locked in there for eternity. He gets hit and then gets back up again. And the first thing they look up is this tower with the little windmill with what looks, and the turbines kind of look like spokes, cards in the spokes, and it's just going around forever and ever and ever like he is. Sick joke. See, there is some direct film analysis on this. Now back to the radicalization. Um, no, actually, I forgot where I was going to go with that.
No, that's
Apologies.
all right. Yeah, this for
Mm,
me, when I first watched it, I was really enjoying the film up to this point. I
mm,
thought the story and mystery that it was building up was really interesting because, of course, they're heading to this town. He's figured out a map to a town that
mm,
shouldn't exist because it's a fictional town that only exists in the stories. And I thought,
mm,
oh, okay, this is really interesting. But it was this scene with this long drive into that town that really cemented, okay, this film's good because
mm.
it really just ramps up the creep factor here.
So
First with
much.
that encounter with the kid going around and around, getting older on the bicycle, and now with the road just vanishing.
Oh,
And
it's
it's
a
done
much.
very minimalistically, and that's a
Yeah.
really nice effect there.
Oh, you can thank ILM, Industrial Light and Magic. They did that effect. All the other physical ones, as far as I know, are KNB Studios. So kudos to ILM. And yeah, you're right. This is a much more ambitious, much more out there vision. That to be honest, I think Carpenter likes to challenge himself. He'd done Halloween as just a quick. Very well done, very minimalist horror, and it kicked off so much. And I think he was kind of done with it because he always wanted Halloween to be an anthology series where you would get a Halloween film, but it could be any story, Black Mirror style. And I think he never wanted to be pinned down. He wanted to try stuff. And one of the first things you said about him was he was a bit of a chameleon who could do anything. I think he's
Hmm.
proving that there. He's stretching himself. I
But,
remembered what I was going to have a dig at.
oh, okay.
It was when J.K. Rowling was thrown under the bus, and all the people who'd worked with her were clearly being chased by journos and asked to condemn. And the three main kids, Rupert Grint, Daniel Radcliffe, and Emma Watson, all threw her under the bus. And Emma Watson, I can believe, has looked at some theory about that and thought about it. I don't believe for a second that Rupert Grint had sat down and formulated a complex opinion on gender. I think he was just being an absolute coward. And his agent had told him, sorry, you got to chuck her. You got your money, bro. It's all good. Sorry. That's what I was going to get at for the whole, they're not just idiots. They're also cowards.
Yeah, absolutely. But back to that scene that we just saw, when you talk about how ambitious this film is absolutely ambitious. But once again, like you said, it's only got a small budget and they were
Mm,
working within it. Other than that one shot that ILM produced, what's all you actually needed for the shot where all of those flashing lights are going on? Well, you just need the car, the actor, a dark room, and some lights to flash at them. And then
mm,
there's some shots of lights going past. Well, you can just repurpose the lights that you're already using for those. Just film them going past really quickly. You can use
mm.
the camera or anything else. So there's a really nice use of the resources that they had available to them to be able to create a very effective sequence, and that's all down to effective editing right there.
Oh, absolutely. It's and very minimalist. Um, we'd been talking about the effect of what you watch on you. Carpenter in the commentary talks a lot about how he specifically removed a lot of direct violence, just saying you didn't need to see it. And it's
Oh,
stuff he
really?
could have done cheaply, but you can hear in the commentary, he's very deliberate about what he showed. And like, this was already an 18. So it's not like he was trying to get a lower certificate. He was really choosing what he included because he didn't want it totally gratuitous. Um, let's see.
Yeah, well,
It.
I think that just goes to show. I mean, Carpenter
Mm,
has not been above gratuitous. The Thing, in particular, is a film with some very gory sequences in it. So
mm,
it might just be that post The Thing, he was done with that and knew that, especially, he might have even just been watching back and going, wow, I've actually made something really unnerving and that makes your skin crawl while you're watching it. Adding the
mm,
violence could have actually taken away from that atmosphere by just turning it into a gore flick. Whereas before, like that shot that we just saw a moment ago of the kids running and then they vanish, so you don't know if exactly if they were actually there or not, or if
mm.
this woman that Sam Neill is traveling with is experiencing some kind of hallucinations. You could see very, very brief glimpses of the fact, like you said, your brain notices that those kids' faces were not exactly normal faces.
Exactly. You don't have time to fully take it in. And it's also this masterful setup and payoff. Just show you the image and you'll get it back a bit later. It's an arresting image. It's a weird image. And it will become more disturbing with each repetition. And I love
And
that stuff.
we see that repeated here as well. So the all of the features of this scene will be repeated as we visit, and I think we visit it 2 or 3 times. It might be a lovely example of the rule of threes. Here's another Twin Peaks alumni
Oh,
who
I was
plays
going to
Mrs.
ask.
Tremond.
Yes, that is indeed Frances Bay. She's got she's got an interesting early life, and then at some point turned into acting, and then went in a couple of lynches. We should also say here that this is the Pickman Hotel. She is Mrs. Pickman, and that is named after the Lovecraft story Pickman's Model.
Pittman's model.
Where hey, um, yeah, it just again this part of the idea that underneath the Stephen King tropes is the Lovecraftian idea, which
And
King would not take offense at. He's very direct in that he is inspired by Lovecraft and he's inspired by Shirley Jackson. So he's very direct about his influences. I think it's to Carpenter's credit that he clearly works in both the Lovecraftian mode and the King mode.
Yes, and I think Lovecraft, obviously, he was the cosmic horror guy, but there's also
Mm,
parts of his cosmic horror that talk about the use of music and art and ideas as a way to
mm,
transmit this. I forget the name of the story. There's a very quick 5 to 10 page short story that he wrote that's in one of my compilations that I have, where there's a man who is living in an apartment building, and next door to him there's a man playing violin, and the
mm,
man becomes completely transfixed by this violin playing of his next door neighbor, to the point where it begins to transcend his mind through reality, because he plays this one piece over and over and over again, I think at the same time of each day, and he becomes transfixed on just waiting for the piece of music to come around again, until
mm,
eventually it transports his consciousness, I think, into that other plane. And that's very, very interesting, because once again, that's just that idea that the art that we consume, the art that we produce, has transcendental qualities that we can't
mm,
wrap our fingers around. We can't quite touch with our hand, touch physically, but it
mm.
still has an effect on us.
Yeah, it does. I mean, let's go from like the music and the art. Let's talk, why not the architecture as well? Seeing as we're just getting a chance to see a wonderful building, that Greek Orthodox church with
Oh yes.
250-foot spires. It's real. It's a genuine place in Toronto. Really does have all that space. I know it looks like it's just a set, but no, that is real. I mean, you look at that. I mean, just imagine what it's like if you've got that in your neighborhood. Wouldn't you just feel lifted up and inspired when you've got this kind of gorgeous architecture?
No, absolutely. And this is one of
Mm.
the horrible things about the modern world that we live in, is that all of the architecture is so utilitarian and grey and blocky. It doesn't
Uniform Dino
inspire.
boxes. Ooh,
Yeah, the Dino buses. Even worse than that, I'll hear the kids again, and you
mm,
can get another glimpse at their faces and just think, "Hold up, that looked a bit weird."
yeah.
But I watched a documentary that someone did on YouTube the other day that was talking about Milton Keynes, the
Oh,
most
yes.
glorious British city. And I didn't know the backstory of Milton Keynes. I think I've been there once when I was a young teenager and didn't remember it much. I remember it being a horrible, awful city. And the reason it was a horrible, awful city is that it was entirely planned by socialists who wanted it to be this incredibly efficient socialist man of the future vision for humanity.
Mm,
And it just turned it into a grey industrial hellscape that's built purely for efficiency and purely for capital management, rather than for anybody to live there. Everything's segmented into roads so that everything can be driven to as efficiently as possible, but it means that if you're walking around the streets, nobody's walking because everybody just
mm.
drives everywhere. All of the buildings are horrible grey blocks. Nothing looks right, and it just looks like a horrible, demoralizing place to live.
It's that thing of planning with your big rational brain versus the wonderful British centuries of tradition and use molding a place organically. That's what we tend to go for.
Now,
Uh,
isn't this gentleman who's calling out for his son Johnny? Isn't he in Isn't he in Ghostbusters too?
I believe he is. It's not a series I'm particularly familiar with. He's got a rather interesting voice for the location. Oh, this makes me think of The Omen so much, by the way, the sort of devilish guard dogs outside the big church, but um, I won't Omen post.
Oh
I
yeah,
wonder if
we
that.
got a nice
Mm.
introduction to Sutter Kane, quite an otherworldly figure. Not
Ambiguous, you're curious about him. Setup and payoff. They've gone, they've tried to get in, they failed. It's building you up for that encounter. We've only just seen a little bit of him. Um,
Yeah,
Carpenter
although
said he's.
sadly he's not quite as scary looking as the real Stephen King.
Oh no, I've got to be nice, but I do wonder almost if maybe Carpenter wasn't entirely enamored of 80s Stephen King when he was making Christine, and maybe that possibly fueled some of the writing on this. Although we should stress, Carpenter did not write this. This was written by a wonderful creepy kid. This was written by Michael DeLuca, who is the executive producer of all three 50 Shades of Grey movies. Yeah.
Oh,
That's right.
wow, he just went up in my estimation. Wow.
Yeah, he only wrote he only wrote 4 movies. I was thinking, okay, he's a writer. He must have done a ton. No, no, he moved into producing really quickly, but his writing credits include kind of quick genre stuff. So Freddy's Dead, Final Nightmare in 91, Judge Dredd 95. And then he's moving into producing, and that seems to be where he lives because he's done some amazing stuff. He did Under the Silver Lake, which I think is an absolutely incredible movie. Um, I mean, in fairness, they've got quite a bit of low quality stuff, but never mind. I'm focusing on the positive after dropping him in
So
it for the
he
50
wrote
Shades stuff.
this presumably drunk and by accident, or we can never count out the idea that the director maybe made a lot of on-set changes because, of course, the writer isn't always going to be there when they're filming everything, so you can take a lot of creative liberty that may not get credited.
Mm.
You can always
Give
count on that.
Yeah, given how much John Carpenter wrote of his movies, you could imagine that happening. I mean, he does like to work with a partner. It used to be Deborah Hill would be his co-writer, but she had sort of long since stopped working with him on this. So possibly he was co-writing and didn't want to take the credit.
Unless this was the original vision for 50 Shades of Grey, we don't know. Perhaps that scene with Miss Pickman earlier on was supposed to get a hell of a lot saucier than we saw. Maybe that's what Carpenter cut out of the final version.
Release the biddy sex cut. That's what I need. More like biddy SM, am I right? Heyo.
Oof.
I don't
Oh.
write these guys, but maybe I
Release the
should, and then
wrinkly
that stuff
cut.
wouldn't happen.
Release the wrinkle cut.
Oh dear. In the mouth of moistness. Oh dear, oh dear.
But
So
here's what I was talking about
mm,
earlier on as well, is that you get the nice repetition of this scene where all of the features come back one at a time, and this painting gets creepier and creepier as you go along. So
mm,
just a nice use of what video games would later do. This like a lot of this comes back so much into cheap um indie horror games that people release
mm.
these days, where you've got the painting and it gets creepier and creepier every time that you pass it, and she gets creepier and creepier as well.
Yeah,
But
more eye
Carpenter just pulls
makeup,
it
you
off so
noticed?
effectively here.
Yeah, she's got the more eye makeup on. We've also seen a sort of transformation of Styles, who turned up as sort of being the company person, being on board, but she has directly seen a lot more of the madness, and it's taking
Mm.
her over. Whereas up to now, Trent has managed to avoid seeing a lot of it, so he's less affected. But at this point, I think she's pretty much switched over, and I think she's going to bounce pretty soon, steal the car and leg it.
Yeah, that
I,
was something that surprised me about the film first time I watched it, and it was really
mm,
pleasant surprise because the narrative does not take the genre generic turns that you would
mm,
expect it to. It's is that she takes a turn and becomes an antagonist who's associated and aligned with Sutter Kane,
mm,
instead of maybe being the voice of reason, as he is the one who slowly becomes insane.
yeah. Oh, there she is. She's legging. Yeah, and it fits that theme. The exposure changes you. Um, she gets one of the greatest quotes in the film that I absolutely love. I wrote it down just because I thought it was so perfect. It's when they're in the car.
There's a
Ah,
bit of that biddy cut.
Uncle Joe, no. Um, so it's when they're in the car. She says, "Kane's work scares me." Trent says, "What's to be scared about? It's not like it's real or anything." She says, "It's not real from your point of view. And right now, reality shares your point of view. What scares me about Kane's work is what might happen if reality shared his point of view." She then says, "A reality is just what we tell each other it is. Sane and insane could easily switch places if the insane were to become the majority. You'd find yourself in a padded cell or in Twitter jail, wondering what happened to the world." And I thought I had to highlight that quote and say, Harry, have you ever encountered something that made you feel like this? Have you ever felt like this when strange things happen and you're going around the twist?
Well, the entire world is going insane. and people that I know and perhaps even used to be in bands with are now dressing in skirts and telling me to address them as well, him as they them. No, I've never experienced anything like that.
Oh, good, good. By the way, do you
And
reckon
and,
that's a
and of course,
Shining reference?
any changes that did happen in that direction, I can be glad to know, peace of mind, that it's entirely natural and organic, and nothing has prompted them to do that. It's a decision they took entirely by themselves.
Yeah, yeah. Nothing you consume has any impact on you. Oh gosh,
Ugh.
this it's so nasty. It's so nasty. It kind of reminds me of the creepy baby in Brain Dead. Um, Carpenter's stance was that he said that children absolutely love playing monsters more than anything. They're really into it. And I was going to say that bit there struck me as the most Stephen King bit. And this is not an attack on King, although it really will sound like one. I thought the ball being thrown to her was very reminiscent of the ball being sort of rolled to Danny in The Shining. So it's a
Oh
like
yeah,
visual homage there. And then also it's the nature of that horror. It's the group of kids being very visibly grim, visibly deformed, with a sort of very familiar distortion of something usually wholesome. So taking the idea of it's mommy's day, uh, "Are you my mommy?" It's like something quite natural, quite quotidian that they've mutated and made weird. And that's what Stephen King does a heck of a lot. Take
and that's
something
what
normal, make it weird. That's my horror. Job done. Lamp monster.
and that's what we're seeing there as well.
Mm,
The church, the big beautiful church that should be a place of sanctity,
mm,
holiness, and the cross inside of it has literally been turned upside down. This
mm,
place that should be sacred has been made into a sacrilege. It's very, very nicely done. And I think what's most effective about the scene before where she sees the children
mm,
is it's not shot in this really shocking way. It's shot in an almost neutral style, the same way that all of the establishing shots leading up to it were, because
mm,
it's not supposed to be throwing the horror in your face in the way a modern film would have done, maybe in the mid 2000s, early 2010s. It's
mm.
just presenting it matter of fact. Here's these kids, and you're the one who's expected to put everything together and register it as holy crap. That's really creepy.
Exactly, exactly. They didn't show you the kids eating that dog's leg, but they've got stuff around their mouths, and that dog is now missing a leg and running off. It's like, you do the maths. By the way, great in-camera effect here where that room changed. Um, Apparently a difficult shot because of that dog would run off in the wrong direction. It's one of the oh gosh, that's a great scare. I forgot they did
Yeah.
that. Um, yeah, that kind of stunt work, by the way, was Jeff Imada, who was also coordinator on Prince of Darkness, and in They Live is the main sort of creepy alien face mask thing. Well, the one that talks. Anytime it talks, it's Jeff Imada underneath the mask. Again, that was Carpenter working with a very, very low budget. He's like, yeah, we only need one that can talk. That'll do. And now
If it works, it works.
oh yeah, now we are finally like much more up close with Sutter Kane.
Oh, that's a really nice effect there as well. Once again, just the nice
Mm,
physical effects of the grotesque, gory door breathing.
exactly. It's so wonderfully unsettling. Just the door being kind of wet as well. It's very grim indeed.
And this environment feels like somewhere that's
Mm,
completely outside of our realm of reality, just where there's this archway with the columns and the door, but the door makes it unnatural. All of these walls look like they're covered in blood or paint, and the texture of them is
mm.
completely unnatural. You feel like you're in some kind of hellish void.
Yeah, it's kind of like a membrane, is what it looks like to me, which is
Mm.
just excellent design. It's apparently Nightmare to Light. If you want to know lots of details on that, listen to the official director's commentary with John Carpenter and Gary Kibbe. He will tell you in great detail about the lighting. For here, I just think it's got that, like you said, wonderful organic feel, disturbingly organic. Um,
Yeah, and I've got to say as well, unlike a lot of films these days, this film, oh, that very nice montage here.
These
It
effects
does
are expensive. Show them multiple times, get your money's worth, and build up a setup and payoff. Great choices there.
bleeding from the eyes.
Mm.
I've been there. Um,
One Guardian headline too many, eh?
no, it was when that guy from Motley Crue accidentally showed a dick pic on Twitter. Um, that that actually happened, by the way. I think it was their drummer. Um,
Oh no.
ugh.
Yeah, what is going on here? The I suppose it matches the idea of the duality, the surface level, the evil behind it, the corruption. It's all there in that lovely visual. But
Yeah.
also
What?
that's expensive, so they make sure to get their money worth. I think they
Get
might
your money
reuse
shot.
it. Yeah. Oh, hey,
Yeah, I
inside
think
number 9. Lovely. That shot is a cheat, by the way. That is such a cheat. There's no way he would not have seen her. I love
that's
this film a lot, but we have to point out where it cheats.
that's a fair point. But what I was going to say about the lighting, though, is that unlike a lot of films, for a while now, the horror is not achieved by just turning all of the lights out and going, "Ooh, look at this dark screen. You can't see anything that's going on. Aren't you scared?" Even the scenes in the dark are very nicely lit. It's something
Mm,
that the 80s and 90s did very well. I think is that the creepiness was used through contrast and use of deep and heavy shadow, while all of the characters are still lit to the point where you can see clearly everything that's going on.
mm.
Whereas now, for some reason, it just seems that they like to just turn all the lights off and go, "Ooh, spooky."
Let it jump out. Oh, look behind the church there. Just that lovely detail. Right in the mist behind the church, you can see a much bigger sort of Cthulhu-like being. Oh,
I didn't
it's so
actually
great.
catch that.
Yeah, it's fun. So if you fancy that, look back on your rewatch, pause on that painting and enjoy it. It's subtly in the mist, easily missed, if you will. Um,
A Cthulhu type figure.
I would say so. They keep it vague. Throughout, they do try and limit what they show, but there are some of the monsters, especially in the end, that are very clearly just a Cthulhu or inspired by some of the more common Cthulhu
I will say
images.
that one shot of Tentacle Miss Pickman
Mm.
was the one shot so far I would say that looks cheap.
Yeah, there's a reason for that. That was an effects fail. They originally weren't going to do it that way because that's according to the commentary. It's a model.
You can
Ironically,
tell.
Pickman is a model, but they originally dressed her up and gave her a monster outfit and monster physical effects, but it just didn't look that good. So they decided they had to redo it, and they went with a miniature that was animated and controlled. Um, but even then, I think it does look a tiny bit janky. So it's unfortunate. It's a bit of an effects fail. There's one or two things like that, like the jump scare that was much earlier, where you have a jump scare on the sofa with the cop. I just thought that the cop who was deformed looked a bit sort of nonplussed, a bit lazy, and it would have been much better if they'd been more actively like raising the baton, trying to strike. I thought that was a bit of a ball dropping as well.
I didn't get that from it, but I can understand. This is a much better effect right here. That one.
Oh, that looks fantastic. Yeah. And again, setup and payoff. We'd been told it was going to be there. And I think this is a section where we can use some of that wonderful lighting advice. So something the cinematographer mentioned was when he's shooting outside, it's very difficult, and it genuinely is difficult to do low light photography and make it look good. One thing he did was he wets the road, and that assists in the lighting because then the road is a bit more reflective. And I'm just thinking I'm going to watch out for that in future.
Yeah.
In fact, we get a chance later on. It's just that was an interesting one to see. But I think in that section we're about to see a heck of a lot of budget saving.
Oh yeah, where you get to use the same set and the same scenario over and over and over again, just with minor changes.
Yeah, definitely. I'm just I'm since I found out that they lost basically a third of their budget, I look out for where they manage to save it. And I think something like that, where you have a night shoot where you've got to take over a whole street, you've got to do a whole load of tough lighting, you've got to get a bunch of extras, and you've got to get them in deformed makeup. You want to get your money's worth out of that. You want to get every single frame you can. And they found a way to do that, to reuse it, but also to make the horror around that a bit more creative. It's not just the horror of scary, spooky face people. It's the horror of being trapped. It's the horror of basically being controlled, not having free will. Carpenter is a
That's a great
Mm,
line there as well. I no, don't do this. I have to. He wrote me this way.
mm,
That's a wonderful line. So creepy.
yeah. Now with this, I wondered, that's going to be quite relevant here, because I do wonder, what is the logic of the mob? What is the logic of Styles there? Why does she punch him? What's she trying to do? If she had knocked him out, would that help? And I think the answer is ultimately she isn't in control. She is being written. This is all in the control of Sutter Kane and his
Yeah, this
attempts.
is where
Mm,
the reality really starts to break down for Sam Neill.
yeah. And again, efficient use of resources. That sort of deep horror over not being in control, you can see why that really works for Carpenter, because there's a consistent theme in his work of basically anti-authoritarianism or
Mm.
questioning authority, let's say. He's I think if you've got a consistent theme in his work, it's kind of a boomer, leave me alone to grill kind of vibe.
Yeah, I can get that. It manifests itself in different ways, but certainly in his 80s output through to this, I can definitely see that.
Mm, yeah. I wasn't a big fan of hot wiring the car super quick either, I've got to say.
That's definitely a cheat to just get him out of the situation as quickly as possible.
Mhm.
But yeah, along the anti-authoritarian, it's definitely this idea as well that those in charge in this situation, being Sutter Kane, have bad intentions for you. They don't want what's best for you. They want you to die. They want you to be brainwashed. I think
Mm.
there's a good Sam Hyde quote about it. Even there's the
Mm.
remember they want you dead, your kids raped, and they think it's funny. That's kind of John Carpenter's approach to it, but from a leftist perspective. But he still has that skepticism, and I can't. I've got to be honest.
Mm.
Living in the times that we do right now, I've got to say, I don't trust the people who are in charge.
No, no, and it is a bit weird watching this sort of anti the man angle when you see that what it led to. Sorry, just on this effect, I think this is one where they got a bit indulgent and shouldn't have tried to get their money's worth, because this effect is basically the walk from The Exorcist, which Friedkin very wisely cut from the version that was available at the time that In the Mouth of Madness was released. Obviously, the director's cut of The Exorcist in 2000. The spider walk is back, but the effect, it's very obvious how it is done. It's very obviously not Linda Blair going down the stairs. And in that one, when your contortionist flips over, and it's very obvious that it's just a contortionist wearing a mask upside down, I think you
Yeah,
can't
and
hide it.
it
So,
did linger on the shot a little bit. I still think it's effective in what it's trying to do, but it does. I think it just lingers a bit too long. It also feels like a little bit of a callback to the thing where you have the
mm,
something like the spider head running about, for instance. It felt like a bit of a reference to that.
yeah, I could go with that. I mean, I think this is extremely referential. It's touching on all sorts of horror very deliberately and making those references quite clear. But in this, I think, just like you said, they lingered a bit too long. It became a bit too obvious how it was done. And ultimately, when it's just sort of a quick scare, um, you can go with it. Thematically, it has got something else to it, though. Of course, it's someone whose worldview is turned upside down. Like, the everything is mixed up topsy turvy. Why not? When you're in this sort of realm of insanity, why not? That sort of inversion of the logic of the world is uh, made sort of what's the word I'm looking for? Incarnate in her body. That's the most pretentious thing I've ever said in a commentary. I apologize.
I'm so glad that I was here for that.
I was trying to get the sentence out, and it just got more and more convoluted. Um,
Now we've all been there. We're recording it from our perspective. Obviously, everybody listening is listening to a pre-record, but from our perspective, it's live. And
yeah.
when you've got off the cuff commentary coming on, you can't really curate it. Just however it comes out, it's perfect because destiny manifests itself. And so if that's the way I said it, then god damn it, I was never going to say it any other way. And it's perfect just the way it is.
Oh, bless. It does have very different energy doing this commentary as a duo. I quite like it. It's but all the others I've done, I just have sort of timestamp notes down with basically something every 30 seconds, um, so that I can flow, but I've got something to reference there from research. Whereas I don't know, it's got nice energy, even if it's you've reassured me about some
Yeah,
of
there you
the
go. I'm
absolute
here as
ponciness.
emotional support. I'm basically the dog.
There was a really good bit of the effects there. That thing we talked about, the use of crowds, how you have fairly normal people in the crowds, and then just in amidst them, you hide absolute spiteful mutants, we might call them. Um,
Hmm.
and just before his car reached Styles, and she's there, ironically, she's in white. She's meant to look innocent. Just before we reach her, on the left is the most deformed guy. Excellent stuff.
Yeah, I think as well with that, it's showing how in a situation like this, you as the last sane man are manipulated by the fact that all of your loved ones or people that you trust have gone insane as well because by avoiding her, I mean, he's just playing straight into Sutter Kane's hands, and whether or
Mm,
not he's being written by Sutter Kane in that situation, he might as well be. So if we're going with this whole madness of crowds theme that crops up throughout Carpenter as well, it's just kind of how the individual can be led by the crowd
mm.
if he lets himself, because that was a moment of weakness for Sam Neill. Because realistically, she's not Styles anymore. He should have just rammed her over. It wouldn't have been nice, but
Mm.
got to do what you got to do to escape a demonic Lovecraft, Stephen King hellscape.
Fire up the Dodge Charger, and this
And just
whole
go
set,
calm.
yeah, this whole section is kind of touching on that stuff. So it's making the argument that base cultural axioms are what kind of create reality, which is sort of what they talked about in the car as well. But um, your boy Sutter Kane is making that point a bit more direct, and I think it was getting at what you were getting at about how you're living in the culture, seeing everything go crazy, and how disturbing that is. I mean, that is just our reality, isn't it?
Yeah, and you could even tie in. It would be a bit of a
Mm,
stretch, but you could tie in the fact that Sutter Kane is here, is obviously taking the role of a preacher, a priest
mm,
in this confessional box. I think it's probably more of a reference to Stephen King's hang up on Christianity, because
mm.
Stephen King always has to have everything be about how Christians are secretly making the world a worse place.
He
But
does
here,
like to get that in there.
yes, he does. That man has a lot of, I can only assume, unresolved childhood issues. Um, if God real, why am I so horny all the time, etc., etc. Um, but but you could tie it into.
I just wanted to clip that, but sorry. Good,
You
good,
can
good.
flip it. That's kind of like boomer atheist logic, though, isn't
Mm,
it? This kind that Stephen King adheres to. But with that, you could say, obviously he's taking the authority role of the
mm,
priest, and a lot of the things that we suffer from right now. A lot of people say that there is a religious dimension
mm,
to the insane beliefs that people have these days, just because of the fact of they're purely irrational. The people who are proselytizing to these
mm.
people who believe it all preach a form of irrationality, which goes against the world as we understand it scientifically.
Yeah, it's And it's a really, I'd say, quite an advanced point in here is that you destroy that old religion and something else comes in. Something else is always ready to come in and do that.
Yeah, and it's not as benevolent as what was there before.
Mm. Do you think there's a bit in here about, how can I say, is this film sort of making reality and power a bit too bottom up if it requires everyone to believe it, or do you think it's a bit more elite theory minded?
Well, it's entirely top down. The
Mm,
people on the bottom don't believe anything that they're not told to believe. That's the point here. Is that you can
mm,
find individual people who'll fight against it, like Sam Neill, but without the power that's bestowed by evil forces, power incarnate, whatever you want to describe it. Without that, but backing him, he literally can't do anything. All he can do is be led by the nose one step to the other while everybody else around him is manipulated from top down. So I'd say it's far more elite theory.
excellent. I mean, I'm glad we agree. I just thought I would make sure we get that in the commentary by asking you that question. Um,
Yes, because
I've got a note I
even
wanted
in
to bring
something
up.
like
Oh,
They
go
Live.
ahead.
Oh, sorry. Even
No,
in
go
something
ahead.
like They Live, it's
Mm,
not this kind of bottom up perspective. It's really the exploits of a great man against the crowds.
mm. Yeah, it would be a bit jarring if after They Live, this was very much a bottom up thing. Yeah, notice the wet floor there, lighting appreciators. That's also a bit of forced perspective. And we're about to see an effect here that was a compromise. Originally, the idea was that the whole town would be shown being sucked into the portal, sucked into the book, but that was too expensive when their budget got cut. So we have this. This is another industrial light and magic job. But something I just want to highlight was that in the last montage we saw, we had a deformed woman leaping out of the painting in the Pickman motel. And that's a great symbol for fiction entering reality, which is the sort of theme of the film. Fiction will shape reality. It's one of a few instances where that happens. I just thought that was nicely done. By the way, just looking at the writing we can see on the right, unfortunately, Carl had boldness. Harry, comment? It's
Well,
just about the middle on the right.
oh dear, you're right. Now, I can't say much. It would be giving away industry secrets. Just to let everybody know, Lotus Eaters has a fantastic makeup and special effects team that we owe a lot to.
And no beanie budget.
No,
We're
we've not
possibly
quite got
veering.
the budget for a beanie.
We're possibly veering too far into in-joke territory. Yes, this is. I would just want to say this is, as well as looking really, really good. This is fascinating. Any film about this sort of extremely meta, you are being written thing leads you to this problem of what happens when you find the script and you want to see what's ahead. They always have to run into that problem, and I just think this handles it amazingly. This is so unique looking. It's such a distinctive vision. And just absolute kudos to John Carpenter for coming up with this.
Yes, I must say I respect as well that Carpenter goes all in on the themes of the film and the logical end point of all of this, which is, another a less brave film might have said, and then he manages to break the script and he manages to go against the programming. But no, that's not how this works. That's not the logic of this film. He's fully controlled by the
Mm,
script now. The
yeah,
the book, the writing, he's doing exactly what it wants. This is an end of the world film in the same way that the other parts of the apocalypse films could be considered to be, except this one goes all the way and says, no, this is definitively full stop the end of the world. The good guys lose, the bad guys win. You are all being controlled.
yeah, absolutely. And we work towards it a bit. You'll notice this is our second, what I'd call a John Carpenter trademark teleport. So just as with They Live, where our protagonist basically got to the final stage by jumping through a magic tunnel, in this, we just had via the ramming sequence, Trent just gets dropped where he needs to be twice. Excellent. Also, as you
Ah,
brought
here
up,
he is.
who is he? Look at it.
Oh my goodness. He killed them. All of them.
That's right. He's young Hayden. He's seen John Trent with the manuscript, and not just the manuscript, but the war manuscript and the children manuscript too.
Oh no. From his
Uh,
perspective, Sutter Kane is evil.
I don't think the script works. Oh dear.
No, I
I
think we
should
may
not.
have gone too far in a few places.
We have, yes. uh, where could I learn this route back to town?
For God's sake.
Sorry. Oh, I can't help it.
It's not so
It's a meme cast now. They never knew. They thought it was
Oh
just
god.
innocent casting, but now it's fully memed.
It's not something an editor could teach you.
Oh dear. But yeah, so that thing with the trademark Carpenter teleport, I really admire it. Because as we've seen in so many of these, and you and I have talked about Christine before, um, Carpenter does not make super long movies. He's extremely efficient. This is a 95-minute movie, and we just saw two instances. Oh, sorry, just on this hotel, the motel even. I thought the way that board was set up, it kind of looked like a cinema from the outside. That is Robot Monster from 1953 on the TV, by the way. And behind it is a big antenna, kind of like Trent is in there to broadcast a film,
Yeah,
which
it's
is
a big
kind of what
transmitter.
yeah, that's what he's there to do. He's brought the manuscript into the world. He is there to transmit it, try as he might to avoid that fate, but he is going to. And I just thought that bit of design was amazing.
Yeah,
Um,
it's the way he's trying to set himself off the path, but he's already well on the rails at this point. He can't do anything to avoid the inevitable.
yeah.
That's always a really effective mode of horror for me. The idea that fate is set and you
Mm.
can't escape it.
Oh, absolutely. And it's a sort of, especially if you've grown up in a very individualist society, that sort of, no, you can't choose actually. It's fated gets even creepier. And
Mm.
also, he's also doing what he should do. He does not want the manuscript. He's tried to avoid it. He's going to try and destroy it. He's doing all the logical things. And even if it's futile, I'm really glad they show him trying it.
Well, yeah, he's not an idiot protagonist. He's at points a very skeptical protagonist, but he's skeptical because of the way that he's operating logically.
Yeah. You know, on the matter of skepticism, there is something kind of interesting there. We didn't talk about it previously, but oh, by the way, that big guy that is a cameo from I think a costume designer. I think. Let's see. Oh yes, wardrobe master Bob Bush. Anyway, so on the matter of cynicism, I found it really interesting that in this, um, Trent's first assumption is that he's part of a marketing scam. That this is all a publicity stunt about Sutter Kane going missing. And later, Styles basically confesses that there was a scam, but unfortunately, Sutter Kane then genuinely went missing, which I feel is kind of like this meta point about what starts as fiction ends up in reality. Again,
Yeah, I can
just
see that.
something that comes in
It's
on the
all just part of
rewatch.
the theme, really, isn't it? It's
Mm,
once again, it's one of Carpenter's virtues that he makes, like you say, very efficient films. They're very tight, both in terms of
mm.
their runtime and also the scripting. Especially in this, there's not really a moment wasted. So having even more incidental plot points like that tie into the overall theme is just excellent filmmaking.
Totally.
And this is a brilliant scene as well. This is a great meme gift that I see all the time.
Yes, yes. Lots of effort into this to make everything look like Violet Beauregard, but one of those with I think so many more people will have seen the meme than will have ever seen this excellent film. It's really sad.
It's a shame, but if it draws even 10 extra people to actually watching the film, then it's worth it.
I would go with that. I would go with that. And as you were saying about Carpenter as a writer, an efficient writer, when you've established that Sutter Kane is basically God here, basically in charge of everything, why not just have him, mess around with Trent and then drop him exactly where he wants him? Which is what happens. He runs through the crowd, teleported directly into the sanctum. And then when you're done running down the tunnel, get dropped into the real world, exactly where Kane wants you. It fits the theme. It's also very efficient. You and I
Yeah,
think, can
and,
imagine
and
just the film that would have an extra 6 minutes of him heading to the church or something.
or having Sutter Kane go on a 10-minute monologue about exactly why he's doing this, even though it's just no. This is my calling. I want to write.
Mm,
This is how I write. I've been given these powers, so why not? You can get infatuated with power
mm,
like that. And also I like how beautifully human it is when Sam Neill asks him, why is everything blue? Why is it always blue? Oh well, no, I don't think he asks him. He just tells him, doesn't he? He just says, "Well, it's my favorite color. I just like blue. So here, everything's blue for 5 minutes." Yeah, if you were completely drunk on power and you had the power to back it up, why not just mess with people?
yeah, why not indeed? Why not indeed? Here they are getting their Charlton Heston money, doing all the best again. Total control over what's happening. So yeah, why not mess with our version of reality? We are now firmly proving that Styles is right. We have flipped into the insane world where everything is just what Sutter Kane says it is, and yeah, Trent is the one in the wrong. Excellent. That sense of helplessness where he's just told, "Oh no, everything's already happened. You don't understand reality." It's so nice. I think
Yeah,
it
and
works so well.
it's twisting the knife on Trent as well,
Mm,
because once again, if this is how Sutter Kane is writing everything, Sutter
mm,
Kane could realistically write it so that Trent knows that he's done all this, but he's writing him purposefully to be confused and distressed, um, have no idea what's going on,
mm.
just as a bit of extra torment for him.
And talking about extra torment, the fact that it's his face on the book cover, absolutely brutal.
Oh yeah.
It's,
And when he
it's
sees and when he sees the film later on, right at the end of the film, and he walks in, he's even just the guy in the film as well. It's not like they chose a different, not Sam Neill, somebody else to do it for the fake film within the film. No, it's just you.
yeah. Ah, it would have been terrible if they'd done a fake Sam Neill. Would not have been a good choice. Oh dear. Yeah.
And here you have again, and I think this is a genuine problem that I've spoken about before. This sensationalist stories and films, the ones that really go for the lowest common denominator, that
Mm,
really spread poor morals and have disgusting themes, generally do sell quite well. It's like the as the Saw films ramped up in gore, for instance, and that's all they
mm.
became known for. People are still attracted in that way because people just get desensitized to it. This guy doesn't even realize that that his eyes are bleeding.
It's almost like there is kind of a, I don't know, slightly reactionary reading, slightly dissident reading in this film, just inherently in there. You know?
I think that's the thing that's interesting about the old left, and I would argue that someone like Carpenter seems more like a guy who belongs to the old left. Is that the old left
Mm,
and reactionaries do have quite a lot of overlap in the way that they understand and perceive the world.
mm,
Obviously, their solutions tend to be very different, and some of their social values are as well, but there's a shocking amount of commonality.
mm. Yeah. You were noticing that in sort of condemning the material that's in the book, you notice that Carpenter did not show us the axe going into the head. He cut
Oh,
away
yeah.
from that. He could have done it. He could have very easily shown us a big gory effect. He didn't do it there. It's that restraint. And I suppose it would have looked a bit bad if in that moment he'd sort of tried to condemn the book and then had his way showing the acts. Obviously, there is gore in this, but it is much more creative gore.
Yeah, honestly, that would have felt like, even though the film's got once again the creepy tone, it would have shifted that tone into something a bit more crass.
Mm. Trent has just said it's well, sorry. About a few seconds ago, he was saying it's safer in here, and I'm taking that to mean that he's saying Styles has been proven right. That Sane and Insane have switched places now. So yeah, he is a sane guy locked up in a cell the way Styles said he would be, and he never had any choice around it. It's it's an interesting one because
Do you reckon he has any control over his actions here, or do you reckon he's still on the rails? Because at this point where things have already been set too much in motion, I wouldn't be that shocked if Kane had just decided, "I'll let you go off script now." There's nothing that you can do, so you can just organically experience the world end, and I'll just make sure that you don't die, so you get to be the last man standing.
it would be an extremely ironic sort of service to him to give him that freedom when he can't do anything. Maybe that is what happens, being let out of the cell is that sign of freedom. I mean, noticing in a way he's been in this cell for the entire movie because he was telling us what happened. So the entire time he's been constrained, which is true because he's been controlled by Sutter Kane. So now, uh, when he's let out of the cell, yeah, maybe he does actually have free will for the first time, but it can't do anything. There's a minor debate. I don't know if there's much in it, to be honest, but you can have a debate over whether Trent was real at any point and entering a crazy world, or whether he was always fiction and first sent into the real world to then come into the fictional world of Sutter Kane. It gets a bit mind bending. I'm not sure it adds all that much to the analysis. I don't know if you had a take on that.
I don't think it would add anything, to be perfectly honest, because the horror of this would be being a normal, sane person and being thrust into this situation where the freedom that you previously had has been taken away from you.
Mm,
If he's always been a make believe fictional character, then that just means that Sutter Kane made up a character to torment for no other reason. Whereas if he had a history and a life before that, it seems more effective to me. It's quite
mm,
similar to Ridley Scott's director's cut version of Blade Runner,
mm,
where there's the heavy hint that Deckard was a replica all along, which turns the story from being a story of almost star-crossed um, Romeo and Juliet forbidden love between a human being and a robot into being just two robots falling in love with each other. It's one of those things. Oh, it sounds smart and sounds clever, but thematically and emotionally actually takes away from the film, I would say. Plus, I would say there's no text in the film to really point in that direction either.
mm. It's one of those, yeah. I think it's a nice comparison, really. Without dropping any spoilers, people may be minded of the film The Empty Man, which you can have something of a similar discussion over, but we won't go into spoilers of that. It's much more central to that one, I think, whereas here I think it would be kind of incidental. There's something we can see as well as the blood there's paper all over the floor. Because obviously all hell has broken loose, basically, although um, a more Lovecraftian hell. I don't think we said at the start, I mean, this is quite well known. This is a water treatment facility in Toronto. They shot this all around Toronto. But a detail I really like in showing the end of the world has happened is the littering, basically, but it's all pages. And as well as looking crazy, it's also like Sutter Kane's influence, his work, his text is all over the place. I thought that was quite clever, quite a nice symbol for what's happened.
But
Um,
I'd say it also has something else that you could draw from it, which is that now that the world has ended, there's no need for stories anymore. You can
mm,
discard the pages on the ground because what's done is done. It's done
mm.
its work.
I like that additional reading. Yeah. Yeah, why not? Yeah, I mean, when you are in the story, yes, do you need it? Um, this is so beautifully shot. I absolutely love it. It's such great lighting, such a lovely atmospheric shot. Um, they did do this projection as just an optical effect, though, because obviously the film was not edited, it was not all proofed. So Sam Neill is just sitting laughing at a blank screen.
Yeah, I'd say of actors with roles to crazy memeable scenes ratios, Sam Neill's up there. He's got quite a lot of insane scenes in Possession, and this one produced this and the bus scene.
Yeah, you're doing pretty well. And again, so few will have watched this movie. But again, hopefully they will. Just like you said, they've seen the memes. Now they'll come for the film. It's an odd place to end it, but I suppose where do you go? Where do you go from here? You know?
Again, it's that efficient filmmaking where, yeah, that's just where the film ends. Why would we go on? The world is ended. This film was about the world ending. Well, there's nothing much. Presumably, Trent either goes on to eke out an existence among the rubble or dies soon after. And that's not the interesting part of his story. The interesting part of his story is experiencing the end of the world through his eyes. And for those watching, you can hear the badass Enter Sandman ripoff going on. I will say, as much as I enjoy that song, it's quite jarring to go from such an effective and atmospheric ending to it's quite funny.
It is jarring, but again, I don't know how you. I don't even know how I feel about that ending, because the movie at that point just goes fully dark humor. To be honest, where he's just laughing at the absurdity of it, and I find it hard to know how to feel about it. You know, I did just notice in the credits.
I like it. I think it's a quite human reaction. It's the old laugh or cry. At that point, he knows that the world has ended. He tried to do what he could. So, what are you going to do? Is he going to put a gun to his head after this? Maybe, but he went from the laughter into the crying, and then it cuts because it really emphasizes that despair. So, I quite like it.
Yeah, it's certainly memorable. I noticed in the credits, amongst the group of creepy kids, there was a Verhoeven. Not many Verhoevens around. I do wonder, is it Paul Verhoeven, the Starship Troopers RoboCop director? Do you reckon he snuck one of his kids into that crowd of little monsters?
Perhaps. Little bug child?
Could be. Usually when you see kids like that, it's that's just all the producers' kids snuck in for a moment. Or just any sort of terrible child actors in movies tend to be like the director or producer's kids.
To be perfectly honest, I would prefer if that was the case more often than not. If you have to use children in your film, make it so that they're related to someone who's part of the production, because that adds a little layer of protection, because we know what happens to kids in Hollywood when they get recruited from the outside. You know, there's a lot of vulnerability there.
Oh, very Dan Schneider. Well, I didn't think we'd go into Dan Schneider territory here, but I know this is a delight of these commentaries. We are firmly in the credits now, so you know I should also point out that we're going about 3 minutes longer than Carpenter did. He signed off the second the credits started in his commentary.
He was like, "Has my paycheck arrived yet? I could get paid for this now, right?"
It's weird to think he only did this because Body Bags failed. That was the TV series he was trying to do. It didn't work, so he just managed to do some extra footage, make it an anthology. But if that had taken off, we wouldn't have had this wonderful film.
Oh well, thank God. It's kind of like Lynch with Mulholland Drive in that sense.
Yes. Oh, great comparison. But
can you imagine if that had been a TV show? That would have.
I mean,
where
would
it
have
have
been amazing? Because trouble is, I just love Mulholland Drive so much. I wouldn't want it to be a TV show. I've got the Losser version, Harry.
Yeah, me too.
We probably have less. We have less than a minute of commentary left, so we should. Sorry, credits left. So we should probably round off now. This was great fun to do. Thank you so much, Harry.
Thank you very much for having me on. This has been great fun. This is the first ever film commentary I've ever done.
Oh yeah, I enjoyed it. I enjoyed it greatly, and I hope you listening have enjoyed it as well. Let us know. Maybe we can have more, but I hope you enjoyed it.
Wait,
and
what
got
was
a
that
lot
at the
from
end?
this.
The interplanetary psychiatric. What body count was high, casualties were heavy. What was that at the end there? Animal action. No animal was harmed. Wait, here we go.
Okay, I'll
Just
edit this
normal
easy.
boilerplate stuff here. Human interaction was monitored by the Interplanetary Psychiatric Association. The body count was high. The casualties are heavy. I quite like that. For those
John
who stick around to the end of the film, that's a nice little thing.
John Carpenter, you rogue. Well done.
Yeah, lovely.
All right, so
Thanks for listening, guys.
cheers, guys. Yeah, yeah. I think we said. Oh, and all the usual like and subscribe. You know how YouTube works, and let
Give us
us know.
money.
Money is always welcome,
Chloe deserves your money.
as well as suggestions for future films. Always welcome. All right, thank you so much.